There are some people who have found a loophole, travellers coming from India, where they're able to go through Doha and into Australia. So there's a loophole there when the government said that there wasn't one.
Listen, we'll get advice from the experts on this and fully investigate it. I'm not across the details of it, but we did close the borders to India for a reason, and it's a very sensible precautionary measure.
Fair enough. But is that something that would worry you, though?
We've taken this measure for a reason, and that's because there's been 350,000 new COVID cases a day in India, and we certainly don't want to infect Australians. So let's take a look at this. Let's get the advice. If there are loopholes, let's address them.
OK, and just one more, as a Victorian, briefly. This Mickleham facility, do you think it has merit?
Again, I'm not across the details of this. I'm hesitant to make strong comments on it at this particular stage without being across it. I've had a few other things on my
fair enough. A few other things like National Curriculum Minister. The critics are certainly barking loudly over it, claiming that it paints a false picture of the country's settlement. What do you make of that? And is this something that you may need to intervene on?
I'm certainly concerned about what I have read to date. Now, I've only just received the draft at the same time as you, and I think it is a good development that the draft national curriculum includes more emphasis on Indigenous history. I think we should honour our Indigenous history and teach that well. But equally, that should not come at the expense of dishonouring our Western heritage, which has made us the liberal democracy that we are today. We have to get the balance right, and I'm concerned that we haven't in the draft that's been put out. But I will say, Pete, it is just a draft. We've now got the opportunity for public consultation before it'll come to me and the state and territory ministers for approval later this year.
So what's your role now? What do you start to push back on this? What does intervening from your side of things look like?
We'll have some discussion in relation to this today at the Ministerial Council, which is here in Melbourne, which I chair. But we'll also be listening to the public feedback over the next couple of months. Then ACARA, who is a separate entity owned by the state and territory governments, will then put up a final proposal for ministers to approve later this year. But certainly I would be looking for some changes from what I've seen reported so far. I think there are some very good elements, though, that have been included. I think including some of the maths elements which are lifting the standards, which is what I want to see, because we've had a decline in education standards over the last 20 years. And this review of the national curriculum, the most important part of it, in my view, is to lift the overall standards so that we can get back to where we used to be 20 years ago. We are seeing some of that in the mathematics curriculum at the very least.
Well, some critics have pointed to the fact that Invasion Day may well be promoted in schools, hence turning some students into activists. Is that a criticism that you would share? I
don't want students to be turned into activists. I want them to be taught the facts, and they should understand and be taught the facts as it relates to Indigenous history, from an Indigenous perspective as much as from a non-Indigenous perspective. And certainly some people from an Indigenous perspective saw things very, very differently to what the white settlers saw it from, and that should be taught as well.
OK.
But we've got to get the balance right here.
Sure.
That's my main point.
All right. And just finally, you just mentioned there that there's some changes when it comes to maths, in particular times tables and the clock, and learning about the clock and time differences. That's going to be pushed back a year. How does that make sense when we're falling so far behind in maths?
Those things perplex me, Pete. I've had a quick look at the maths curriculum. In most dimensions, they are bringing forward the date of learning. For example, percentages are now going to be taught in Year 8 rather than Year 9. Pythagoras' theory is going to be taught earlier. But they're saying that times tables should be taught in Grade 4 rather than Grade 3. Not sure about that. Let's take another look at that. I want to see the standards raised, not diminished.
Yeah, I think a lot of parents would agree with you on that front. Minister, appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.